Rude chef embarrasses waitress. Neymar's kindness turns her day around. How will this story turn out? To find out, watch the video to the end. But first, please subscribe to my channel and turn on notifications to get more stories like this. The restaurant was alive with the sounds of clinking glasses, murmured conversations, and the rhythmic chopping of vegetables in the open kitchen. It was a high-end establishment, known for its impeccable service and demanding kitchen staff. Every night, the team worked tirelessly to ensure perfection, but not everyone was treated equally in this well-oiled machine. Among the waitstaff was Isabella, a young waitress with bright eyes and a determined spirit. She had only been working at the restaurant for a few months, still learning the ropes, but she was hardworking and eager to prove herself. Unfortunately, proving herself was nearly impossible when the head chef, Victor, had made her his personal target. Victor was notorious for his temper. His reputation as a brilliant but brutal chef was well known, and he showed no mercy to anyone he deemed incompetent. Unfortunately, Isabella had somehow ended up in his crosshairs from day one. No matter how hard she tried, no matter how perfectly she executed her tasks, he always found something to criticize. That night, the restaurant was busier than ever. A famous footballer was rumored to be dining in, and everyone was on edge, making sure everything was flawless. Isabella moved quickly between tables, balancing plates with practiced ease, making sure each guest was satisfied. Then it happened. Victor's voice thundered through the kitchen, loud enough that even some of the diners turned their heads. "Isabella," he roared. She flinched, her heart sinking. Setting down a tray carefully, she hurried into the kitchen. Victor stood at the pass, holding a plate of steak in his hand, his face twisted in anger. "What is this?" he demanded, shoving the plate toward her. Isabella's eyes darted to the dish. It looked perfect. The steak was cooked to the right temperature, the sides were beautifully arranged, and even the sauce was drizzled artistically. I don't understand," she said hesitantly. Victor slammed his palm against the counter, making her jump. "That's exactly the problem. You don't understand. You took too long to pick up this order, and now the food is ruined. Do you know what happens to a steak when it sits too long? It dies." "I was delivering food to table 5, Isabella tried to explain, but Victor wasn't listening. "Excuses. If you can't handle something as simple as picking up a plate, maybe you should go find a job where your incompetence won't ruin an entire dining experience." Some of the other chefs shifted uncomfortably, clearly used to his outbursts but still unwilling to step in. The other waiters in the kitchen lowered their heads, pretending not to see Isabella's humiliation. She clenched her fists at her sides, her face burning with shame. Fighting back tears, she took the plate and rushed back out to the dining floor. As she placed the steak down in front of a guest, she forced a smile, but her hands trembled. The guest, a man in a tailored suit with sharp, observant eyes, noticed. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice warm and genuinely concerned. Isabella blinked, caught off guard. Most customers didn't notice the staff beyond their food and drinks. "Yes," she said quickly, "just a busy night." The man studied her for a moment, then gave a small nod. "Thank you." As Isabella turned to leave, she suddenly realized who he was. Neymar, the famous Brazilian football star. Her stomach twisted. Of all the people to have witnessed her humiliation, it had to be one of the most famous athletes in the world. She prayed he hadn't heard Victor yelling at her earlier. Meanwhile, back in the kitchen, Victor was fuming over something else. The staff moved around him with silent efficiency, avoiding his wrath. But Neymar had heard everything. He had seen everything, and he didn't like what he saw. A few minutes later, Isabella returned to Neymar's table to check if everything was to his liking. "How was your meal?" she asked with the same polite smile she had practiced 1,000 times. Neymar set his fork down and looked at her. "The food is great," he said, "but I have a question." She hesitated. "Of course, sir. Does he always talk to you like that?" Her breath hitched. She knew exactly who he was referring to. She glanced around nervously, but Victor was too busy berating a line cook to notice. It's just how things are in the kitchen," she said carefully. Neymar's expression darkened slightly. That doesn't mean it's right. Isabella bit her lip, unsure of what to say. Then Neymar did something unexpected. He waved down the restaurant manager, a middle-aged man with a stiff posture who immediately rushed over. "Is everything all right, Mr. Neymar?" the manager asked. Neymar leaned back in his chair, his gaze cool and measured. "Your food is excellent, but your chef's attitude toward his staff? That's another story." The manager stiffened. I'm not sure I understand. I don't like seeing people get treated like they're nothing," Neymar said, glancing at Isabella. "And from what I've seen tonight, that chef of yours seems to think he's the king of this place." The manager paled. The entire restaurant had fallen silent, guests trying to discreetly listen in. Victor, who had been barking orders in the kitchen, finally noticed the scene unfolding outside. His eyes narrowed as he stormed over. "Is there a problem?" he asked, his voice filled with irritation. Neymar turned to him, completely calm. "Yes, there is." Victor folded his arms. "If you have a complaint about your meal, It's not the meal," Neymar interrupted. "It's the way you treat your staff." Victor scoffed, glancing at Isabella. "Oh, please, this is a high-stress kitchen. If she can't handle it, she's free to leave." Neymar's jaw tightened. "And yet she's still here, working, doing her best. Despite how you humiliate her." Victor rolled his eyes. "Are we really doing this? A footballer lecturing me on how to run my restaurant?" Neymar smiled slightly. "I know what it means to work hard. I know what it's like to be under pressure. But I also know that respect doesn't cost a thing." The words hit Victor harder than he expected. By now, the entire restaurant was watching. The weight of Neymar's words hung in the air, impossible to ignore. Victor sneered. "Look, I don't have time for this. I run this kitchen how I see fit." Neymar reached into his pocket and pulled out his wallet. Without breaking eye contact, he placed a thick stack of bills on the table. "I respect hard work," Neymar said, "and I respect people who do their jobs with dignity. This is for Isabella." Gasps rippled through the restaurant. Isabella's eyes widened in shock. Victor's face turned red. "She doesn't need your pity." "It's not pity," Neymar said simply. "It's appreciation. Something you clearly don't understand." Silence. For the first time, Victor had no response. Isabella's hands shook as she looked at the money, then at Neymar. I can't accept this." "Yes, you can," Neymar said. "Because you deserve better." Tears pricked at her eyes. And then, something even more unexpected happened. One by one, other customers started leaving generous tips on their tables. Some of them murmured words of encouragement to Isabella as they left. Victor watched in horror as the restaurant's atmosphere shifted entirely. The once feared chef was now the outcast. And Isabella? She was finally seen. Isabella stood frozen, her hands trembling as she stared at the thick stack of bills Neymar had placed in front of her. The weight of the moment pressed down on her, but not in the way Victor's insults had. This was different. This was the weight of something she had never truly felt before: validation. Victor, meanwhile, was seething. His face was red with anger, his fists clenched at his sides. "This is ridiculous," he spat. "You think you can walk in here and dictate how I run my kitchen?" Neymar remained calm, his expression unreadable. "I'm not dictating anything," he said. "I'm just showing people what real leadership looks like." The word stung, and Victor knew it. The other staff members were watching him closely, some with barely concealed smirks, others with wide-eyed awe. Sophia, one of the senior waitresses, stepped forward, placing her hand on Isabella's shoulder. "She's one of the hardest workers here," Sophia said, her voice firm. "And you treat her like she's disposable." Victor scoffed. "Oh, please. If she doesn't like how I run things, she can leave." Isabella finally found her voice. "Maybe I will." A ripple of murmurs spread through the restaurant. Victor blinked. "Excuse me?" Isabella exhaled slowly, steadying herself. "Maybe I don't need to work in a place where I'm constantly belittled. Maybe I don't need to tolerate this abuse just because it's how kitchens work." Victor laughed humorlessly. "And what will you do? Walk out and throw away your career?" Good luck finding another job with no experience. Before Isabella could respond, Neymar leaned forward. Actually, he said, his voice smooth and deliberate, she won't have to worry about that. Victor frowned. What? Neymar turned to Isabella. If you really want to leave, I have friends who own restaurants. They actually respect their staff. I can make a call. Isabella's eyes widened. You would do that for me? Neymar smiled. I told you, respect doesn't cost anything. Victor's jaw clenched. He could see it now, the shift in power, the way his control over the staff was slipping away. His arrogance had built this restaurant, but now his pride was about to destroy it. And then, something happened that he never saw coming. One by one, the other waitstaff and even some of the kitchen crew started untying their aprons. Sophia was the first to set hers down. I've had enough of this place. Miguel, one of the line cooks, followed. Me too. Then Daniel, the dishwasher. Then Marcos, another chef. Within moments, nearly half the staff had placed their uniforms down, standing together in silent defiance. Victor looked around, his face going pale. You can't just walk out. This is my restaurant. Sophia crossed her arms. Not anymore. The remaining customers, having witnessed the entire event, were now murmuring among themselves. Some stood up, leaving their own generous tips for the departing staff before walking out in protest. Victor's kingdom was crumbling before his very eyes. Neymar watched it all with quiet satisfaction. He hadn't come here expecting to change lives, but when he saw injustice, he couldn't ignore it. Isabella turned to him, still in shock. I don't know what to say. He shrugged. Say you'll do something good with this opportunity. She wiped a tear from her cheek and nodded. I will. Neymar smiled. Good. With that, he stood, stretched his arms, and prepared to leave. Victor, desperate, took a step toward him. This isn't fair. You ruined my restaurant. Neymar stopped and turned slightly. No, Victor. You did that all by yourself. The words hit harder than any insult ever could. And with that, Neymar walked out of the restaurant, leaving behind a legacy of kindness that would never be forgotten. Isabella looked at Sophia and the others, still standing together in the empty restaurant. They weren't just employees anymore. They were something more. They were free. Outside the restaurant, Isabella took a deep breath, the cool night air filling her lungs. She looked down at the thick stack of bills Neymar had left on the table, still unable to believe what had just happened. It felt like a dream, one where, for the first time in her life, she wasn't powerless. Sophia walked up beside her, crossing her arms. So, she said, a hint of a smile playing on her lips. What now? Isabella let out a breathless laugh. I have no idea. Miguel, the line cook, joined them, glancing over his shoulder at the restaurant they had all just walked out of. Feels weird, huh? Daniel, the dishwasher, chuckled. Feels incredible. One by one, the rest of the staff who had walked out gathered around, their faces still filled with shock and exhilaration. They had taken a stand against Victor. They had refused to let him dictate their worth. But now, reality was sinking in. They were unemployed. What if we just made the biggest mistake of our lives? Someone muttered. Sophia shook her head. Or maybe we just made the best decision we've ever made. Isabella bit her lip, thinking. She had spent years working under Victor, convincing herself that she had no choice but to endure his cruelty. But Neymar's words still echoed in her mind. Respect doesn't cost anything. And now, standing here with people who had been just as trapped as she had been, an idea began to form. What if, she started hesitantly, we didn't go looking for another job? Miguel frowned. What do you mean? What if we opened our own restaurant? Silence. Then, laughter. Daniel wiped his eyes. Isabella, we just quit our jobs. We have no money, no location, no experience running a business. Isabella's grip tightened on the money in her hands. We have this, she said, holding up the cash Neymar had left behind. Sophia's eyes widened. You want to use Neymar's tip to start a restaurant? Why not? Isabella asked, suddenly feeling bold. We know how to cook. We know how to serve. More importantly, we know what not to do. No yelling, no fear. A restaurant where people actually want to work. Miguel rubbed his chin. It's crazy, Sophia grinned. It's brilliant. Excitement rippled through the group. They had spent so much time being told they weren't good enough, that they were disposable. But what if they could prove everyone wrong? Isabella took a deep breath. We don't have all the answers yet, but if there's one thing tonight has taught me, it's that we deserve better. And if no one's going to give us that, then we'll create it ourselves. Sophia put her hand out in the middle of the group. I'm in. Miguel placed his hand on top of hers. Me too. One by one, the others joined in, their hands stacked together, bound by something stronger than a paycheck. Determination. Isabella looked at them, her heart swelling with something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. We start tomorrow, she said. And just like that, their journey began. Over the next few weeks, Isabella, Sophia, Miguel, and the rest of their team worked tirelessly to bring their vision to life. It wasn't easy. They had no investors, no fancy connections. Just the money Neymar had left and their unwavering determination. Finding a location was their first challenge. Renting a space in the city was out of the question. They didn't have enough money for that. But after endless searching, they found a small, rundown cafe on the outskirts of town. It had been abandoned for years, its windows covered in dust, its walls cracked and peeling. It's not much, Miguel admitted as they stood outside the building, assessing the damage. Sophia crossed her arms. It's perfect, Daniel grinned. Yeah, because it means we get to build it from scratch. Our way. They pooled their money together and signed the lease. Every last cent went into the deposit and the first month's rent. There was no turning back now. From that moment, their lives became a whirlwind of renovations. They cleaned, painted, repaired broken furniture, and did everything they could with their own hands. It was exhausting, but for the first time they were working for themselves, not for a boss who treated them like they were nothing. Every night, after hours of hard labor, they would sit together on the floor, eating takeout, talking about their dreams for the restaurant. No more yelling in the kitchen, Isabella said. No more toxic bosses, Sophia added. Miguel grinned. And the best food in town. Slowly, their little restaurant started coming together. The walls were repainted a warm, inviting color. They managed to get a few second-hand tables and chairs. A local supplier, after hearing their story, agreed to provide fresh ingredients at a discount. But even as they made progress, doubt still lingered. What if no one comes? Daniel asked one night. Isabella looked around at their hard work, then at the people who had become her family. They'll come, she said confidently. And she was right. The night before their grand opening, something incredible happened. A message popped up on Isabella's phone. Neymar, I heard you're opening a restaurant. Her heart stopped. She quickly typed back. How did you? Neymar, word gets around. So, what's it called? Isabella blinked, realizing something horrifying. They hadn't picked a name. Sophia, who had been watching over Isabella's shoulder, gasped. Wait, Neymar knows? Miguel grabbed his phone. We need a name. Now! The group huddled together, throwing out suggestions. New beginnings? No, too cheesy. The kitchen? Too plain. Then Isabella murmured, Esperança. Everyone turned to her. It means hope in Portuguese, she explained, because that's what this place is. It's what he gave us. Silence. Then Sophia nodded. Esperança it is. Isabella typed back. It's called Esperança. Neymar, beautiful name. See you tomorrow. Her breath caught. Tomorrow? Neymar wouldn't miss it. She stared at the screen in disbelief. Neymar was coming to their grand opening. The pressure was on. The next morning, the restaurant was buzzing with excitement and nerves. They had done everything they could to make it perfect. But would it be enough? As the first customers walked in, Isabella held her breath. And then, just as promised, Neymar stepped through the door. The entire restaurant went silent. All eyes were on him. He smiled as he walked over to Isabella. So, he said, looking around. You did it. She swallowed hard. We did. Neymar grinned. Let's see if the food is as good as the story. Isabella's heart pounded as Neymar took his seat. The other customers whispered among themselves, stealing glances at the global football star who had just walked into their small restaurant. She still couldn't believe he was here, not just as a supporter, but as a customer. Sophia nudged her. Breathe, she whispered, grinning. Isabella took a deep breath and grabbed her notepad. She approached Neymar's table with as much confidence as she could muster. So, what can I get you? Neymar looked up at her with a playful smile. I trust you. What do you recommend? Isabella had been preparing for this question all night. We have a house special, something we all worked on together. It represents everything this place stands for. Then I'll take that, Neymar said without hesitation. She nodded and hurried to the kitchen, where Miguel was already at work. Neymar ordered the house special, she announced. Miguel's eyes widened. Then we better make it perfect. The entire kitchen moved with synchronized determination. Every dish was crafted with care, not because they feared a boss yelling at them, but because they truly loved what they were doing. Minutes later, Isabella carefully carried the dish to Neymar's table, setting it down in front of him. He picked up his fork, took a bite, and chewed slowly. The entire restaurant seemed to hold its breath. Then, a slow smile spread across his face. This, he said, looking up at Isabella, is incredible. She exhaled a breath she didn't realize she was holding. Neymar took another bite, nodding in satisfaction. You did it, he said simply. You built something real. Isabella blinked back unexpected tears. Thank you, she whispered. Word spread quickly. Customers flooded in, eager to try the restaurant that had not only Neymar's stamp of approval, but also a powerful story behind it. By the end of the night, every table was full, and the kitchen had run out of ingredients. They had completely sold out. Isabella and her team stood together, exhausted but elated. We did it, Sophia murmured, barely able to believe it. Miguel grinned. No, we just got started. Then, something unexpected happened. A familiar figure stepped through the door. Marco. The entire restaurant fell silent. Isabella's stomach twisted. Marco looked different. Not angry, not arrogant, but hesitant. Slowly, he approached. Elena, he said. She straightened her shoulders. It's Isabella. Marco exhaled. I heard about what you built. I had to see it for myself. She said nothing, waiting. Marco glanced around, taking in the atmosphere. The warm, welcoming energy. The happy staff. The satisfied customers. It was nothing like the environment he had created. His jaw tightened. I was wrong, he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. About a lot of things. Isabella raised an eyebrow. It took losing everything for you to realize that? Marco let out a humorless chuckle. Yeah, it did. He hesitated. I wanted to say, I'm sorry. The words hung in the air. Isabella studied him. Did she believe him? Could people like Marco change? Maybe, maybe not. But she had moved on. She didn't need his apology. She didn't need validation from the man who had once humiliated her. Because standing here, in a restaurant she helped build, surrounded by people who respected her, she knew the truth. She had already won. She smiled politely. Thank you for coming, Marco. I hope you find what you're looking for. Marco nodded slowly, understanding. He turned and walked out the door. And just like that, the past was behind her. Isabella turned back to her team, to the restaurant, to the life she had created. Sophia nudged her. That felt good, huh? Isabella laughed. Better than I ever imagined. Miguel grinned. So, what's next? Isabella glanced at Neymar, who was still enjoying his meal, smiling at the energy of the restaurant. She had a feeling this was only the beginning. She looked at her friends, her team, her family, and smiled. Next, she said, we keep growing, together, and with that, she stepped into her future, knowing that this time, she was exactly where she was meant to be. Because in the end, kindness had won, and kindness always wins.